And this is probably a good time to sing a few verses. Russell, could I have that glass of water, please? It's your shout, Russell. I love to have a beer with Duncan. I love to have a beer with Dunk. We drink in moderation, and we never, ever, ever get rolling drunk. We drink at the town and country, where the atmosphere is great. I love to have a beer with Duncan, 'cause Duncan's me mate. And I love to have a beer with Colin, yeah. I love to have a beer with Col. We drink in moderation, and it wouldn't really matter if he brings his doll. We drink at the town and country, where the atmosphere is great. I love to have a beer with Colin, 'cause Colin's me mate. And I love to have a beer with Kevin, his brother. I love to have a beer with Kev. We drink in moderation, and he drives me home in his big old Chev. We drink at the town and country, where the atmosphere is great. I love to have a beer with Kevin, 'cause Kevin's me mate. And I love to have a beer with Patrick, that's me. I love to have a beer with Pat. We drink in moderation, and it wouldn't really matter if the beer was flat. We drink at the town and country, where the atmosphere is great. I love to have a beer with Patrick, 'cause Patrick's me mate. Barry, where is he? The publican. I love to have a beer with Barry. I love to have a beer with Baz. He's a little bit tight-fisted. I'm sure he hasn't shouted, but he says he has. We drink at the town and country, where the atmosphere is great. I love to have a beer with Barry, 'cause Barry's me mate. And Jeffrey, where's Jeff? You'll do. I love to have a beer with Jeffrey. I love to have a beer with Jeff. He's a little bit like Barry. When it's his turn to shout, you'd swear he was deaf. We drink at the town and country, where the atmosphere is great. I love to have a beer with Jeffrey, 'cause Jeffrey's me mate. One more, Russell. Me mate Russell. I love to have a beer with Russell. I love to have a beer with Russ. He's a little bit like the other two. When it's his turn to shout, he looks at us. What do you look at us for? 17. Buy 17 schooners, all right? That's your shout. We drink in town and country, where the atmosphere is great. I love to have a beer with Russell, 'cause Russell's me mate. All together. I love to have a beer with Duncan. I love to have a beer with Dunk. We drink in moderation, and we never, ever, ever get rolling drunk. We drink at the town and country, where the atmosphere is great. I love to have a beer with Duncan, 'cause Duncan's me mate. I love to have a beer with Duncan, 'cause Duncan's me mate. And that's all. I got home one Saturday afternoon to the stunning news that Slim Dusty had rung. I had sent one of my discs to a post office box address in Parramatta, where they used to receive truckloads of songs from people like me. They were actually recording at the time, so on Monday morning they took it in, knocked up some chord charts for the band, and the second take was pressed by EMI and released as a single. And on the 10th of November 1980, 2UE listeners heard John Laws play Duncan 11 times on the first morning. He loved it. He really loved it. He flogged it. It put Slim Dusty on Countdown. Many of you would remember that, if you're old enough. Slim Dusty is a monument in our culture, we all know that. And I'm fully aware that what Slim Dusty did for Duncan is beyond measure. But as my brother said back then, that song mysteriously captures the character of Australian mateship. Soon after that, a nephew of mine came across the phrase, "I'd love to have a beer with whoever," in the daily press. And he said, that song's become part of our culture. And a Baptist minister a year ago said to me, you know, that song's all about relationships. Had I set out to do that, it would not have happened. But the most amazing thing is the reaction we get when people find out that I wrote it. From the very beginning, Duncan was so closely associated with Slim Dusty that everyone just assumes that he wrote it. In the very early days, my kids would come home very upset when their schoolmates wouldn't believe that their dad wrote Duncan.
Yeah, my dad wrote Puff the Magic Dragon.
You can hear it, can't you? In fairness to Slim, he was in no way responsible for this. In fact, if anything, he attempted early on to distance himself from Duncan because they did not want it to become the signature song. It's a ditty. It's not a bush ballad. I can understand that. I met the Wiggles when they toured Wagga in 2001. Soon after they'd recorded I'd Love to Have a Dance with Dorothy. Have you heard that? It is beautiful. If you've got grandchildren, you've heard it. And they, the Wiggles, they were thrilled to meet me. The Wiggles. That's ridiculous.